The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Jack Barazzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel is Pat Scott. Hey, Pat.
Good evening, or daytime, wherever you are.
Yeah.
Hi.
Awesome. Looks like we got a lot of fun things to cover today. And as I was just saying before we started recording here, it seems like Facebook has been in the news a lot lately, and that's going to be our first topic here is Facebook's big rebranding, the way they're putting it is that they're changing the course and becoming a more comprehensive company. And so what happened is last week at their Facebook Connect event, which is like their equivalent of like the WWDC or one of those kind of things, their yearly developer conference where they announce all their new stuff. Mark Zuckerberg announced that they are changing the name of the company from Facebook Incorporated to Meta. And what he's saying with this is basically they're going to move from being just the one social media app with owning other things, like they own WhatsApp and they own Oculus, they own Instagram. And so they're going to have an umbrella corporation, not the Resident Evil game, but called Meta, that is going to have all those things underneath it. And this is similar to what Google did this, I think in 2015 or 2016, where they became Alphabet. And that was like the top level company. And then Google and all the other sub companies are underneath that top level one. So they can be a more encompassing company. And what they've been talking a lot about here is this thing known as the Metaverse. And essentially what it is it seems to be 50% just marketing fluff and 50% almost like an attempt to, it makes me think of like Second Life, which was really big back in like the early 2000s. But what it is integrating technology into every aspect of your life with augmented reality and virtual reality, and basically wanting to be a part of every single experience you have is going to be augmented in some way by technology. And it's an interesting idea, but given all the other things that Facebook has been in the news for, with all the leaks they have about how their data is being misused or how bad Facebook is for teenagers especially, I think it's rubbing a lot of people the wrong way, and it definitely does not feel like a positive thing, and it just comes across as very, very dystopian. I know a lot of people have compared it to like Ready Player One, or kind of a lot of those cyberpunk things like The Matrix, where you're plugged into this massive corporation that has its hands in every single part of your life. What are your thoughts on it, Pat?
Well, the name is really off-putting for a lot of people. They don't know what they even is meant by Meta, and it's
Right.
really confusing to them. And I do use the analogy of Ready Player One and Second Life and Snow Crash and a couple of other things to try to explain that it's looking at you participate in lots of things now that are multimedia. In other words, you can pick up a book, you can read it on read it on a Kindle, you can listen to it on audio, you can see it in a movie. So there's already that I've got one thing that I experience in multiple ways. And so the metaverse is kind of that metaphor for saying, how can people communicate and cooperate and work together and play together and socialize together? And it's done across multiple medias. Mm-hmm. So there might be somebody that's on a PC just doing a video conference and somebody else may be in a VR headset and still in the same meeting talking about the same things, but they're using different methods of communication, but still cooperating. And somebody else might be sitting in a studio audience, and raising their hand and asking questions of real people in that same situation. So the metaverse, to me, is saying I've got one thing I'm doing, and I can participate in multiple ways. And up until now, Facebook has been primarily focused on the entertainment aspect, which is the Oculus
Right.
and the Rift, and they've started into some Horizons, which is like a Second Life, only it's a Facebook product, or has been a Facebook product, and it's mostly entertainment. But
Hmm.
now they had already started talking about, but now are really getting more into the work aspect. How do you do work collaboration? And there are already a lot of tools in VR
Right.
for that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I
it's
think it's just trying to bring different people into a common task or a common goal and work with different media.
right. And that's something this article here from The Verge talks about. It's entitled "The Metaverse, the Multiverse, and the End of Your Free Time," and it's kind of talking about what you just mentioned with the entertainment focus on Facebook, and how all our entertainment nowadays is not, it's not like you get a book and it's the story and you read it and you're done. It's everything is a franchise, everything is a like a multiverse. That it's kind of like what Marvel did, and they were kind of the first ones to really spearhead that. How it's this multimedia experience rather than a piece of art or a piece of entertainment you consume.
You have the
And
movie, you've got the video game,
right,
you've got the books, the board games. Yeah, all again
and
surrounding the one idea.
right, and it's I mean, I like that stuff as far as it goes, but I really think that it's contributing to the death of like people developed culture. Everything now is like back in the day, and I'm not trying to sound like back in the day kids get off my lawn, but people would sit around and they would sing songs together, and they would create their own entertainment and create their culture themselves. And we've shifted to be such a consumer oriented culture that everything now is just something that we are bringing in from a large corporation. And as these conglomerates get bigger and bigger, like Disney is buying up Lucasfilm and Marvel and all these things, it ends up being it's almost like, and I don't say this to like denigrate like Star Wars or Marvel or anything like that, but it feels like you're just buying this prepackaged like processed food product that you're just going to consume, and it's not about telling a good story. It's about what can we push out to the customer to keep them engaged. And that's really the vibe I get from a lot of the way Facebook has pushed it, at least.
Well, and I understand that point of view, but I also feel like that as people, we have a responsibility to keep a balance in our life.
Right.
And like I know with Dom's family, there's some screen time, but there's mostly a lot of creative play and art
Right.
and that type of thing. And you have to look to the people to bring a balance in there. And
Right.
just like that, people used to complain about computer games, and I'm saying, well, people still used to waste time doing crossword puzzles,
Hmm.
or reading the newspaper at work, or filing their nails. You can't blame the technology, but it's true that the more attractive the technology is, the more people are going to want to use it, and that could, in some cases, if they don't keep a good balance, then they could be just consuming. Yes.
Right. And that's what worries me about the line between the provider of the technology and the provider of the access to the content. When they become the same person who is creating the content, they're going to push their own stuff before they're going to push other things. And just the way like search algorithms work, like when YouTube makes their own content versus user created content. And as these things have grown, it's become less about how can you find all this different content from all different kinds of people that have created it, and more it becomes a very artificially curated experience. And
Except,
that's what worries me about the Facebook Meta thing.
well, except that with the Oculus, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
there are not very many Oculus or Facebook owned apps. Most of the apps are things that are cross platform, that are on other things, that are over on Steam, etc. So it's not just one content provider.
Right.
It's the platform you get on, but just like you can use Steam to play this one walkabout mini golf, I can play it on the Oculus and play with people from that other platform. Now, not
Mm-hmm.
all games or all apps are multi-platform in the same way, and some are just strictly single one. But there's a
Right.
lot of independent developers that are creating things. and putting them out for free, and in a side store that you can get to from your headset, and bring in 3D picture jigsaw puzzles that you can play. And they're not made by Facebook, they're not made by the company, but they're just able to play on that platform.
Right. Nice. I was actually not aware of that. I thought it was more like a siloed content, but also that's good to know. And speaking of the Oculus, that's another thing they brought up, is that they're going to be they're rebranding the whole Oculus line. It's going to be the Meta VR line, and they have this new fitness app, Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be incorporated within that.
Well, actually, it already exists, and it's become very successful. And it was a company called Within that bought them, and then Facebook has now bought that Within. And
right.
So Supernatural was not created by Facebook, but it has been very popular. And I think that a lot of people feel like this may provide some additional funding to help keep the costs down for the individuals, but allow for a lot more developer content.
Right. Yeah. So I know that you're a big fan of the Oculus, right?
Yeah, and because it's the most easily accessible in terms of dollars. That's where I started. And
Yeah,
I think that's the main thing on the Oculus, is they're losing money on the headset.
Right.
But they're trying to provide an entry level for people to get into VR, to use it for meetings, for using it for games, using it for social interaction, for creativity, for world building, that type of thing. And so I like it. Now, it's not, I don't do everything in there. I mean, that's obviously the balance you're talking about. But I mean, you can watch movies in there, or you can play miniature golf, or you can play badminton, or whatever you want to do. But some of those are cross-platform, and others are just strictly, in the one device.
Right. Yeah. So is this something that you're looking forward to positively in terms of the potential for VR and stuff like that?
Yeah, I really am. I feel like if that there are a lot of aspects of VR that people have been, like this last year and a half, they haven't been able to travel, they haven't been able to go to a gym, they haven't been able to get out to go to movies, and this provides a safe way to do these types of things and interact with other people, not to the exclusion of doing it with your friends and family, but it's another way that people who are homebound, who are disabled, who are sitting in a wheelchair, can do physical exercise and travel virtually. I see it as a very positive thing for education, for medicine, for, just like the video chats have become very helpful for medical. This could also be brought into like a VR environment too, where people can actually show you what to do in that type of thing in a virtual environment.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know that there are things that we have to watch out for, and yes, the tracking, and the Facebook has not been a good player in terms of tracking and monitoring. I wish it was another company that was doing this, but I am excited for the technology and the things that can open up to people who would be otherwise restricted.
Right, definitely. And it's one of those technologies where before I actually tried a VR headset, my attitude was kind of, I'm sure that's cool, but is it really as cool as everyone says? And then I tried it, and it really is awesome. A couple months ago, we went to this Vincent van Gogh augmented reality exhibit. I think I mentioned this on the show before, actually, but they had a segment where you used an Oculus Rift to like go through this virtual tour of his paintings, and they were kind of like integrated into different scenes of his life. So you're like flying through these different parts of France and or Belgium, wherever he's from, and it would like show you like the scenes where the paintings were inspired, and then like bring it in like with the painting itself. So it was like this really cool experience that you get that you wouldn't get by just looking at pictures online. And that's like for my part, like being able to like tour like the Louvre like virtually or something like that would be really awesome. So I'm really excited about those kinds of applications and things like that.
Well, and they did something very similar with the Mona Lisa, being able to go through and do a lot of in-depth exploration of it in VR that I haven't been able to see yet because it still was very a proprietary thing and only on one particular device, on the HTC Vive, I think it is.
Nice.
And so, I mean, it's those types of things to be able to go to a museum, to go to Pompeii. I walked around Pompeii and got to see it, and I've never been.
Nice.
And it was so exciting. And it's hard to describe to somebody how it feels, that it feels like you're really there. Even if it's
awesome.
cartoonish, you feel this, you hear the sounds, you see the stuff around you 360, and it really is marvelous.
Yeah, it really is. You mentioned the one thing only being available on the HTC Vive, and that's something else that Facebook is kind of talking about, this whole metaverse thing, because they're not the only company that's looking at this. A lot of other companies are using that, and it's become like one of those buzzwords that doesn't have a really nailed down meaning. But what Facebook is saying and what other companies have said is that they don't want this to be a proprietary thing. They don't want it to be like the Facebook metaverse and the Microsoft metaverse, or etc. And that would be, I feel like that's going to really make or break this kind of thing, because if it's going to actually live up to the potential that they're talking about, it has to be a cross-platform, almost like an ambient computing experience where it doesn't matter what kind of device you're on, it is going to just function.
Well, it's kind of like Steam as far as gaming. You know, you can be on a Mac or a PC or I think Linux to play games on Steam and be playing with other people. So you've got the technology, but it can be spread across vendors. And that's what my hope is that that Facebook has been one of the first ones to make it available to people at a lower cost.
Right, definitely. And that's where the offsetting comes in, which is nice. Yeah, it's a really cool idea. I think most people's hesitation is the fact that Facebook is doing it. There's actually this, and that's like, I think my main hesitation. There's this article from Vice that has some rather colorful language in it. So if you're sensitive to that, you can just click over that. But basically, the headline is Zuckerberg announces fantasy world where Facebook is not a horrible company. And they just go through basically the pitch, and it's very, very dystopian vibe that his video gave off. And they talk about Facebook specifically, but I noticed that both in Apple's recent announcement of their new phones and Google's announcement of their Pixel announcement, they all gave off because their focus was very much on your device as like becoming just part of your life and part of the world around you rather than a device you use. And I don't know I don't think it was intentional, but they all gave off a very like cyberpunk dystopian vibe that was kind of unsettling. And that's really, really the vibe that the Facebook thing gave. And I think a lot of it has to do with all this parallel news about the Facebook papers and the whistleblowers and these practices that Facebook is engaged in. And I think that's everyone's main hesitation is, you know, on paper, this sounds great, but is it going to be something where it's an open standard and it's actually secure and people are not taken advantage of? Because Facebook really doesn't have a great track record with that. And so that's really going to be what's going to make or break this.
Well, and the other thing is too is there have been some novels, dystopian novels, obviously, about people that jack in and that they are sitting in a chair 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just absorbing stuff and participating in a virtual world and not living. And that's the other end of it. That's the part that people, I think, are afraid of, is that, you know, people will stop living their lives. But again, I think that, you know, you have to look at it as a whole human being, not as this is going to take over and replace what I'm doing. This is going to be an additional thing that I can use for education or learning or entertainment or socializing. It is not replacing life.
Right. I think the worry is, and I think it's a valid concern, is it's in all these companies' best interest to keep you plugged in as much as possible because that's how they make their revenue.
Of course.
And so they've even shown this, like the way the algorithms work is that they hit that, you know, the ape brain kind of thing, like they hit the button, get the cheese. And I think that's what that's where the worry is, and what kind of oversight is there going to be both internally and externally to prevent like widespread addiction to this kind of thing. Like I know that's a problem they have, especially I think in China with the internet cafes and the addiction that people have to that. So this is already an issue that we have with technology, and it's both a personal discipline thing. Like it's not entirely the company's job to keep people from just sitting around all day and looking at a screen or wearing a headset, but there is some onus, I think, on them to not deliberately design their systems to be as addictive as possible.
Well, and the other thing is like in China, a lot of the problems, it was either Japan or China, I was trying to remember, but where people would stay in their rooms and play video games all day and never come out and end up dying because they're not getting nutrition or whatever, that type of thing. Part of that is because the culture that they were in was pretty oppressive. And therefore that's an escape. And that's the whole theme of Ready Player One, is the world was in an economic disaster. And so that people would escape the real world because they were full of poverty and everything else. And then they could get, the schools and the entertainment and those socialization, they could get that in another form rather than having to live it out in a very dire environment. So we've got to make sure that we're not in an oppressive environment, that we do things to keep people alive and interested in performing in the real world, but just this be an adjunct.
Yeah, definitely. It's, as with most pieces of technology, in of itself, it is not good or bad. It's how it's used and how people use it. Yeah, it's interesting. It's exciting. It's scary. As much as I want to get an Oculus, or I guess now a Meta, I don't have a Facebook account, so I guess I'd have to bite the bullet on that.
No, you won't in the future.
Oh, really?
No, you will not have to get a Facebook account. They've already announced that. They just haven't figured out when they're going to actually decouple it.
Oh, awesome.
So that was the thing that just was announced this week.
Okay, good. I had not heard that. That's good.
That should relieve you a lot. Now, there may be something like a Steam account or a Meta account, but it won't be hooked to anything in Facebook itself.
That's good. Yeah, that's good, because that was my main concern. Is I got rid of my Facebook a while ago and didn't feel like signing back up, but I want to play Star Trek Bridge Commander. So.
Yes, I got it. We can play.
Oh, nice. Yeah, definitely. We should do like an SQPN mission, get everyone together.
Yeah, we had talked about it at one point, and there is one particular app that is cross the PC, and you can do a form of it on the Mac that's called AltSpace, which basically people can be in the different environments and still go into these same worlds and talk and play and do some creative things, etc., but be on different platforms.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
And there's another one that basically you can be on a mobile device as well as being in the Oculus.
Nice. And I feel like that's really one of the goals of the Metaverse thing is it doesn't matter what device you're using to access it. It's just going to work.
Right. And it may be richer in one environment than in another. Right. Just like a 3D movie is a different experience than a black and white movie.
Right. So, definitely. Awesome. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be using technology. I feel like there's a lot of advances coming on. We're going to get to our headlines, but before we do that, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Technology, including Sean G., Michelle Q., George S., Kimberly P., and Aaron C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. All right, we got some fun, interesting headlines. First one here is from The Verge. It is saying, public transportation can save the world if we let it. And it's an interesting analysis of just public transportation, especially in America, and how things have changed since the pandemic, and how it's it's been damaging to public transportation because less people are moving around. And there's also the whole... There's a bunch of different things in play, and it's always been in play, especially in the U.S. with public transportation versus private transportation. Like, if you live in a big city, it's not really as big of a deal because you have access to it. But in Europe, because historically there's not been, towns are much smaller. It's it's been something that's been less of an issue, like car ownership versus public transportation. But in the U.S., it's always been kind of that back and forth. And this is something actually I mentioned to Dom the other day on Twitter, is that if I could, I would like never own a car again and never drive again. But because of where I live, that's not really possible. And I think that's the case for most people who live in the United States.
Right, and the cities are not laid out, or the way that cities or populations are grouped does not lend itself to very effective transportation. I mean, Texas, things are just so spread out that you get a public rail line in, and people have to drive a long way to get to it in order to get somewhere else. Now, if you were living in a larger city, then buses and light rail and all those things become very attractive and less costly than keeping a car. But when you've got a lot of acreage, out there in between your little place where you work and where you go to school and where you shop, you really can't do public transportation very easily.
Right, and that's and one of the things it talks about here in the article is the effect on the climate and the effect on just like the way like things are laid out from transportation. Like I know there's a lot of stuff done early on in the pandemic, especially when no one was traveling anywhere, like the levels of smog that were just clearing from cities and stuff like that. And like regardless of what one thinks about the climate change issue, I think everyone can agree that like more pollution is never a good thing. And so if we're going to have a more efficient way to transport people, that's for everyone's benefit. I know there's been a lot of different proposals, like basically a fleet of electric cars that you just get like your self-driving Uber comes to your house and takes you where you need to go. And I think that that's an interesting it's an interesting idea. I would like to see how well it would scale in reality.
And I can see where it might work in areas that shall we say that there weren't very many, that you could say this area here is all that type of electronic or electric pickup type thing, but you don't have other cars mixed in there.
Right.
In other words, that you could say that this town or this area is kind of not like a pedestrian area, but it's like a self driver assisted type or a electronic assisted section.
Right.
But to try to mix that in with the everyday is not going to be very practical. In fact, it's really hard right now because a lot of people are using Uber and Lyft and things like that. And so that means that there's just as many vehicles traveling and just as many miles being done. It's just that it's being owned by different people as opposed to each person owning a car.
Right, and that's the issue, is that you've got to figure out how to clear up that congestion and also make it feasible for most people to get where they need to go in a timely manner. And the problem with a lot of transportation that this article talks about is that as a result of the pandemic, there's less people riding, and so there's less money coming in, and so the systems are not being kept up or kept on schedule the way they need to be. And that kind of leads to this vicious cycle of it's unreliable, so people don't want to take it, and they're not going to be able to improve it because it's unreliable, and that's why people don't take it.
Well, I thought it interesting, too, in the article that they mentioned that one of the suggestions that was being made is that buses of different sizes are a lot more flexible and can change routes and can change capacities and react to different situations much easier than a rail can or subways can. So maybe we should be looking at more, not necessarily big buses, but smaller fleets of buses that could react more fluidly to change of population needs. And that there may not be, with people working a lot more from home, there may not be the massive rush hours that you have to have the huge systems in place for. If people are working more from home, then they're going to be going out, but at different times of the day and not all at once. And so that something like a bus system would be much more flexible.
I think that would definitely be good. I would also like to see, and this is going to take a shift on like the part of the employers, more flex work being allowed, like where you go into the office when you need, but you don't go in unless you absolutely have to, because there's a lot of days when people go into work and everything you get done, you could get done from home, and you usually get more done from home because you don't have Joe stopping by your desk to chat for 20 minutes and all those different little distractions. And then you also cut out the commute time. Like, I think most people would benefit from the quality of life improvement from not having to drive for 30 minutes to an hour every day. Like, I'm in a position where I'm really lucky that I live like 10 minutes from work, and so it's like 20 to 30 minutes out of my day to drive both ways. But I know a lot of people, especially around larger cities, their commutes are like 45 minutes to an hour or sometimes more. And gaining back those extra 2 to 3 hours per day would be a huge benefit for people, both like mentally and physically, and also just like like from a productivity standpoint.
Well, and I think a lot of companies are beginning to look at that, because there's a lot of employees that are saying we're not coming back.
Right.
We don't want to go back. And so I think they're beginning to offer some compromises, like maybe 2 days a week in the office and 3 at home,
Mm-hmm.
or 2 afternoons a week, or whatever, because they found that they can get a lot of work done. Not all work has to be done in the office. We've proven that this last year. So what can we do to, yes, there needs to be more in office time for certain things, but does it have to be all the time? So I'm kind of
Right.
hoping that there may be more flexibility going on here rather than the companies just saying, oh, no, everybody come back.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be interesting to see as the pandemic hopefully starts winding down how that transition happens, because I know a lot of places have already transitioned, but it's gonna be interesting to see how it all goes. Our next headline comes from CNET. It's talking about Apple's rumored AR headset that's supposed to be coming out next year. And it's going to have Wi-Fi 6E, which is the newest standard of Wi-Fi that's going to allow for much higher data transfers, which means that your experiences wearing this headset are going to be a lot better. It's going to allow for less lag time and higher quality content coming over the headset. What do you think of that? I know you're, as we were talking about recently, you're big into the Oculus. So would you be interested in like what Facebook is going to do or what Apple is going to be doing with this?
Well, I know a lot of people currently on the Oculus platform are talking about getting at least the 6 routers right now to improve their own home environment, to have less lag time. So I think that the push toward the higher routers is good. I think from what I read in some of the articles was saying that the benefit's not that great yet from the 6E. I think it's the 6E over the 6, because there's you'd have to have a lot more people involved to really get the benefit of the 6E, whereas individuals are going to get just as good a result from the 6 routers right now at less cost than these other routers. But yeah, it's true that all the stuff I'm doing on it's just regular Wi-Fi, but I've got Google Fiber. So there are times occasionally where something might slow a little bit down, or I get a stutter, but not very often. Before we went to Google Fiber, there was a lot more, lags, things hang, or you have to restart something. So yeah, obviously the faster speeds are going to be helping. I think it may be a while before we see the cost benefit of going to the full 6E.
Right. And it seems like their main goal here is just to future proof, because that's going to be the next thing that's coming out. And maybe by summer or fall 2022, whenever this device comes out, it will be to that point where it's really going to make a difference. But yeah, like you were saying, the biggest bottleneck for almost any sort of Wi-Fi setup you're going to have in your house is going to be whatever you have piped into your house, because you could have the greatest routers in your house possible, but if you're getting like 50 megabit DSL connection, it's not going to matter.
Well, I do know that some of the people on the using the Oculus with a PC, so they would call that PCVR, that a lot of that action, that if the computer is getting a decent speed, then you can have like a Wi-Fi 5 router, and it makes a huge difference because the speed is between the headset and the PC, not the router and outside. So depending upon what you're doing, it can make a difference whether it's internet slowing you down or your processor slowing you down.
Right, definitely. That's cutting out that bottleneck. But then, as far as I'm aware, the issue there is I believe you have to have I know at least with one version of the Oculus that's not the Rift that's like all standalone. You have to the processing power is kind of shunted over to your computer, so that requires you to have a good like robust gaming PC with the good graphics
that would be the
card.
Rift. Yes, the
Right.
Rift. The Oculus is standalone by its nature, but they make a cord, and now they have wireless that you can make it communicate with your gaming PC, and it has to be a high-powered gaming machine. There's a lot of back and forth about what that constitutes or how much you have to put into it. But then the processing is done on the PC, not on the headset, and it's being used more as the viewer type thing. But the Rift like is not able to be standalone. It is tied to your computer, where the Oculus is independent and by its nature standalone, but you can use it with PC VR.
Okay, nice. Awesome. Our last headline here is interesting for those of us who are like in the maker community or in the kind of custom computer community. The Raspberry Pi has announced that they're going to be doing their first ever price increase. They're going to be bumping up the Raspberry Pi 2 gigabyte model from $35 to $45, which was its original price. And this is due to the ongoing chip shortage that we have going on. And they say that this is just going to be temporary. But I do believe that, we're going to see, like, I know it's been hard to order computer components right now and really get any sort of like reliable estimate. Like I bought the newest Kindle that just came out, and the estimate has changed from like 2 weeks to like a month to like 2 months. So it's a gamble right now when you're buying things and
more costly, not just the delay.
Right. And this is really one of those things where I've seen several, like 3 or 4 articles talking about this, and I think that people are making a bigger deal out of it than it really is, because it's a $10 increase
on a pretty inexpensive thing to begin with. Yes.
Right. So it's just one of those things that I think more than anything else, it just shows the state of the technology world, where things are going to get more expensive and there's going to be longer lead times, and we're not really sure when that's gonna change. Hopefully by the end, people are saying end of next year or early 2023, but we'll just have to see how that goes.
Well, and I see in my own clients, there's because it's taking so long to get a new computer, a lot of more people are looking at, well, what can I do to, make this one last longer, or, look for a used one. And even used ones are becoming pretty expensive and hard to find. And, but operating systems haven't stopped increasing. And so, an older computer is not going to be able to handle some of the newer operating system requirements. But I've got somebody that just ordered a new computer the other day and said, well, it's going to be 6 weeks before I get it. So it's good that his wasn't broken.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to know. Although I did see a couple weeks ago, someone did get Windows 11 running on a 15-year-old Pentium 4 processor. So, hey, I guess if you're in dire need, you could pull out your old Dell from 2004 and put Windows 11 on it.
Well, I'm not sure how well it would really run, but I do know that there's ways to disable the requirement that you have the TPM chip. So at that point too, then you don't get the security updates.
Right. Yeah, that's the workaround there that it's got to happen. All right. It was a lot of interesting stuff going on. We can go to our picks of the week now. Did you want to go first, Pat?
Since I actually have one this time as opposed to the last time I was on with you and forgot all about it. Basically, since a lot of my clients are getting new computers, whether they're desktops or laptops, they're beginning to find that, guess what? A CD drive doesn't come with it. And so if they want to, I've got a client that said, I've got a memorial here from my mom. I'd like to be able to play it, and my new computer doesn't have a DVD drive. And people will have pictures that have been on like cameras, and then they got put onto DVDs by CBS or wherever. And so in looking at that situation, there are USB portable DVD players that are quite good. And I just wanted to mention that I've used 3 different ones, actually 4 different ones that I've been very pleased with. Dell has one, very thin, very lightweight, just plugs into a USB port, and LG and Asus. And then before that, I think I actually had gotten an HP at one point. That was a pretty good one too. And they're all between $35 and $55. And some of them have a plug that could go into either a USB-C or an A. Most of them just have the USB-A that you could, then get a converting hub to use. But I just wanted to mention that it's not a stopping point. If you don't have a DVD player in your new machine, these are pretty reasonable to be able to just plug one in. And all of the ones I mentioned will work on both a Mac and a PC, even though Dell doesn't say it works on a on a Mac. I plugged it in and read some videos into my Mac Air, and then at a client's house, the same drive, I went ahead and showed her where she could use it to play her videos. So
yeah, definitely. I actually have that exact same Dell one, and it works fine on my Windows computer and on my Mac with the M1 chip. I just have to plug it in with the little dongle. It works totally fine, and it's one of those things where I only need it once in a blue moon, but when I do need it, it's nice to have around.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, it's a good thing. It's one of those things where it used to be you always wanted to have your DVD drive in your computer and your floppy drive, and then the floppy drive got dropped, and now the disk drive gets dropped. But it's nice to have around in those rare moments when you need it. All right, my pick of the week is the Chromecast with Google TV. It's the slightly more expensive version of the Chromecast. They have the standard one, which I think is either $20 or $30. This one is $50, and it has the Google TV OS on it, and it also comes with a pretty nice remote. And it just plugs into the HDMI port on any TV you have, and it gives you your Google TV app on there. You can plug in all your different services. They make it really easy to set up, and it integrates well if you have an Android phone. You can control the TV and the Chromecast from your phone from the remote there, or the included remote, which is really nice. It's got a nice clicky D-pad, and it's built like, I know some remotes have like very specific like buttons for each service. So like if you have a Netflix button, but you don't have Netflix, you have that useless button, and it has those buttons on there, but it allows you to map them to whatever hotkey you want, which is nice.
Nice.
It also has something that this is not a feature, like an actual functional feature at all, but it comes in colors other than just black or white or silver, which I appreciate when technology is not just those three colors. I always try to buy a fun color, so I got mine in like this kind of coral pink. So
cool! It's a lot easier to find it in a dark room when you've got a brightly colored object too.
Exactly, yeah. So it just adds a little bit of variety to the black and white and gray of most of my tech. But yeah, it's a quick and easy way to get a smart TV if you don't want to actually spring for a TV with it all built in. And I actually prefer to do it that way because that means that if I ever want to upgrade my streaming device, I don't have to get a whole new TV if they decide to stop supporting it.
Well, and it means you can carry it with you when you're traveling, or you go to see somebody else. You can carry your little device with you and plug it in another TV somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Take it to like a hotel if I ever want to do that.
Yeah, a hotel or your cousin's house or whatever, and watch your Netflix or your Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. That's it from us. What did you think of our discussion? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology, or on the SQPN Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send us an email to technology@sqpn.com. You can find links from our discussion and picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com, and you can help us grow the Secrets of Tech by writing a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or one of the other podcast directories, and share the podcast with your friends to help us grow our community and reach more listeners. Until next time, Pat Scott, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Technology.
It's always fun. Thank you for having me.
And once again, I'm Jack Barazzini. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.